it's Dale here again. Today I'm going to show you how to make the easiest silk paper you can possibly make. This is what, from cocoon strippings, this is what they look like, sort of like scrumbly cotton wool, and they come to me in different forms. But when the cocoons are being done, this is the surplus from the outside. I don't know what they used to do with them, maybe throw them away or use them for various things. They come with bits and pieces of stuff in them, or they have the natural glue or sericin in them, and they make the most wonderful papers that you can use for book covers and all sorts of things. This is a piece that I've made, and I'll just put that one down there, and this is all I've done. I've laid the fibres down on a piece of parchment paper, and you just need liquid. In this case I'm just using water. Spray it, cover with the parchment paper. You need a hot iron, no steam, and iron it up just like so. Turn it over, lift the back off, and iron again. And you can build up layers. Don't just do a huge big piece because it'll go all spongy in the middle. So, and then iron it again, and then let it cure. So I might just leave it to sit there for a while, but this is what it'll be like when it's dried. At that point you can use it, you can colour it. Don't colour it with acrylic paints because they sit on the surface and it's like a plastic surface. But I just colour them with my sprays or coffee or tea or whatever takes your fancy. So this is just putting a bit of colour onto this particular one, which I can use later on. But any sort of water sprays that you've got, inks, and then when it's dry, all ready for something else to happen to. So I'll just lift that right off. And these are the sorts of things that you can do with them. You can trap in leaves, skeleton leaves, you can trap in metallic flakes, and Angelina fibres, paper, those paper petal things that you can get. And when it's settled, it's almost permanent. You can seal it if you like. You can see here now I've used on this one, I've done a little bit of knitting and that's adhered. I've used some foils. I've used part of a paper napkin. I've used some stitch. I've used and I've coloured it, so it's just a sample. And you can also add things like gauze scrim to it, so it makes quite a firm fabric at that point. And then you can, if you've got the right size and so on, you can print through this through your inkjet printer, transfer images to it. Just hundreds of things that you can do. You can use a stencil and use the stencil, just disperse colour and then stitch the stencil up. If you've got, I've made this is a book I've made, and I've transferred, it's a bit tacky now, but I've transferred images onto abaca paper or tissue text and onto the surface as I made it. Here I've used another one with a stencil and adhered it to the surface while I'm working. There's another one here that I've added flakes and bits of scrim and all sorts of things like that, so it makes a lovely textured piece. This is the scrim that I showed you before, and I've stamped onto it and stitched it, so there's the fibres on the back and the scrim on the top, so it makes a very firm piece. It could be a page, it could be a cover, it could be whatever takes your fancy. Then I've also added knitting to it, knitting and paper napkins and scrim, so it gives you a textured piece. This is another one that I've stitched with machine, so it's a nice little background. It could be, I've made purses and little things like that for my books. Another one using some of your bits and pieces and trapping them down under abaca paper, so it just gives you a nice surface to work on. And again another one, and I've used various things like fabric bits, silk fabric, scrim, foils, paper napkins and so on. And this one here is again with scrim and hand stitch and machine stitch, just to give an interesting texture. And then you can write on your before you put it on, and that's the back of it. And from last week I've got some little flower stitches across it because you can never ever have enough of those. Then again, you can adhere bits of paper napkin to it, so you've got a little feature that you might use onto a surface there. This one here is based on the little blocks. My son was in Japan, so I've made a pile of little bookmark hangings based on a pair of red shoes that I bought years ago, and all the stitches from it, so it's just something that you can do. Again, you can write on your papers and then attach it to it with water, just like I showed you, and it's all ready for something else. I've used the idea for making family images, so I've transferred it with the heat onto that surface, because it's a little bit like a Vlisifix in that it stays sticky and adheres things, so you can attach things like that to it and then stitch on it. There's another one here for my grandmother. That's a little bit of paper napkin or whatever you've got floating around that that takes your fancy. This is the little handwritten letter that she wrote part of. There's another image I've put onto it and stitched it down, but it's just such an interesting background. And then if you've got a die cutting machine, you can put it through it and use the cutouts and bond them back down onto a surface, as I said, and then colouring it in any way, and then keeping pieces that you can reuse. So I spray it with lots of bright colours, and then cut up pieces, perhaps put them through the die cutter. You can see the leaf on there and so on. And this one here is a paper napkin from Paris, and it's just been bonded onto it with the heat. When you put things onto it, it's very difficult to show you lots in a little quick video. Another little paper napkin through the die cutting machine again, and adhering printed tissue to the surface, I think that you might like to use. And if you work onto tissue, abaca paper or tissue text onto the surface and colour it, what a fabulous book cover you've got here. So I hope that little idea has given you some food for thought for this week, and I'll see you again.